This is Mystery Port Chronicles. I am Nathaniel Aldridge. In Mystery Port, beauty often conceals death. Let us begin. Beauty, I have learned, often conceals death. The Butterfly Conservatory of Lord Edmund Ashcroft stood as testament to this truth. A magnificent glass palace rising 3 stories above the Mystery Port Botanical Gardens, its crystal walls reflecting autumn sunlight into 1,000 fractured rainbows. Inside, paradise. Outside, on that October morning in 1897, Evelyn and I arrived to find constables blocking the entrance and Dr. Bellamy emerging with an expression I'd rarely seen on his weathered face. Horror. "Nathaniel," he said, forgetting formalities, "you need to see this. I've examined bodies for 30 years. I've never seen anything quite like what's in there." The conservatory's interior was warm, humid, thick with the scent of exotic flowers and something else, something wrong. Through the glass walls, thousands of butterflies moved like living stained glass, crimson, azure, emerald, gold, species collected from every corner of the empire and beyond. Lord Edmund Ashcroft lay in the center of his collection. His body rested on the marble floor beneath a massive blue morpho display, surrounded by flowering orchids. He wore his customary white linen suit, now stained with something dark. His arms were spread wide, his face turned upward as if in ecstasy or agony. But what drew the eye, what made the scene grotesque beyond the simple fact of death, were the chrysalises. Dozens of them covered his body. They clung to his clothes, his skin, his hair. Each one had split open, the butterfly within long emerged or dead. The empty casings remained attached, like burial shrouds made of silk and chitin. "When was he found?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain clinical. Constable Reeves answered, his face pale. 6 o'clock this morning, sir. The groundskeeper came to open the conservatory for daily maintenance, found Lord Edmund Ashcroft like this." "Time of death?" Dr. Bellamy consulted his notes. "Based on body temperature and rigor mortis, I estimate between midnight and 2 a.m. But here's what troubles me. The chrysalises on his body are fresh. They split open within the last 12 hours, yet they're attached as if they'd been growing on him for weeks." I knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb the evidence. The chrysalises were indeed strange. They clustered most heavily on Ashcroft's chest and throat. Some were translucent gold, others jade green, still others a deep purple that seemed to shimmer in the diffused light. "These don't match any species in the conservatory," I observed. "No," Dr. Bellamy confirmed. "I've been a naturalist for 20 years. I've never seen chrysalises quite like these. The coloration is wrong, the size is wrong, and look at this." He pointed to Ashcroft's neck, where the skin showed signs of puncture wounds. He was stung or bitten multiple times. The wounds show signs of venom introduction. Cause of death? That's where it becomes complicated. The venom should have killed him within an hour, but I also found traces of a plant-based toxin in his system, something derived from rainforest species. 2 separate poisons working in concert. Evelyn had been examining the conservatory's layout while we spoke. She returned now, her notebook already filling with observations. The conservatory was locked from inside, all windows secure, no signs of forced entry. Lord Ashcroft locked himself in last night at 7 p.m., as was his custom. He spent every evening alone with his collection. So whoever killed him was either already inside when he locked the doors or had a key. There are only 6 keys, Constable Reeves offered. Lord Edmund Ashcroft kept one. The other 5 belong to the collectors he invited for yesterday's annual exhibition. Exhibition? I asked. Every year, Lord Ashcroft hosted 5 fellow lepidopterists for a private viewing of his collection. Each visitor brought a gift specimen, a rare butterfly or moth to add to his collection. It's considered a great honor in collecting circles. Who were the 5 visitors yesterday? Constable Reeves consulted his notes. Dr. Helena Ashworth, naturalist, Professor James Wickham, entomologist from Oxford, Mrs. Catherine Sterling, amateur collector, Mr. Benjamin Cross, explorer and specimen dealer, and Miss Sarah Drummond, botanical artist. All 5 were here yesterday? From 2 p.m. till 6 p.m., the exhibition concluded, they departed, and Lord Edmund Ashcroft locked himself in for his evening communion with the butterflies. I studied the body again, focusing on the unusual chrysalises. One of those 5 visitors hadn't brought a butterfly. They'd brought something far deadlier, and Lord Edmund Ashcroft's obsession with collection had finally collected him. We interviewed the 5 guests in Lord Ashcroft's manor house, a Gothic monstrosity that loomed beside the conservatory like a tombstone beside a jewel box. Dr. Helena Ashworth received us in the library, surrounded by taxidermied specimens and scientific journals. She was 50, severe, with the focused intensity of someone who'd spent a lifetime studying the minute details of insect anatomy. Edmund was a brilliant collector, she said without preamble. Absolutely ruthless in acquisition, but brilliant nonetheless. His conservatory housed specimens that shouldn't exist anymore. Shouldn't exist? Evelyn asked. Extinct in the wild, the last of their species. Edmund had a talent for finding the final survivors and preserving them. The way she said preserving carried weight. You disapproved, I observed. I'm a scientist, Mr. Aldridge. I believe in conservation, not collection. Edmund believed in possession. He would pay any price, travel any distance, bribe any official to obtain a rare specimen. He didn't care if taking that specimen meant extinction for the species. You brought him a gift yesterday. What was it? Her expression hardened. A Malaysian moon moth chrysalis, quite rare. I obtained it through legal channels from a sustainable breeding program. And you're certain it was a moon moth? I examined it myself before presentation. Standard chrysalis, brown silk, properly formed. There was nothing unusual about it. Dr. Ashworth, did you kill Lord Ashcroft? She didn't flinch at the directness. No, though I won't pretend I'll mourn him. Edmund's collecting practices were destroying species faster than climate change. The world is better off without him. Professor James Wickham was a contrast, elderly, gentle, with ink-stained fingers and the absent manner of a man who lived primarily in his own thoughts. Edmund invited me every year, he said, serving tea with trembling hands. I always brought specimens from my university's collection. Yesterday, I gifted him a glass-wing butterfly chrysalis from Costa Rica. Beautiful creatures, transparent wings like flying windows. Professor, how well did you know Lord Ashcroft? As well as anyone, I suppose. We corresponded for 30 years, collaborated on several papers, though we disagreed fundamentally on methodology. How so? Edmund believed butterflies existed to be caught and displayed. I believe they exist to be observed in their natural habitat. He was a hunter. I'm a student. Yet you provided specimens for his collection. Wickham's gentle face showed pain. Yes, to my eternal shame. I told myself it was scientific exchange, but truly I was complicit in his extinction of species. I gave him access to university resources, helped him obtain permits, all because he was charming and generous with funding. Did you argue with him about this? Constantly, in fact. I told him his latest acquisition was unconscionable. What acquisition? The Azul Divino, the divine blue. A butterfly found only in one valley in the Amazon. Edmund had obtained the last breeding pair. He planned to let them mate in captivity, then preserve the entire species in his collection, never release them back to the wild. Wickham's hands shook harder. I told him he was playing God, that some things shouldn't be possessed. He laughed, said possession was the only true form of love. Mrs. Catherine Sterling was wealthy, fashionable, and utterly unrepentant about her hobby. "I collect beautiful things," she said, adjusting her elaborate hat adorned with actual butterfly wings, "jewels, paintings, and yes, butterflies. Edmund and I were kindred spirits in that regard." "You don't see ethical problems with the collection?" Evelyn asked. "Ethics, my dear. Butterflies live for weeks at most. We simply preserve their beauty beyond their natural lifespan. It's practically charity. Even when it drives species to extinction, everything goes extinct eventually. We're simply curating the memory." Her casual cruelty was almost refreshing in its honesty. "What did you bring Lord Ashcroft yesterday?" I asked. "A death's head hawk moth chrysalis, quite dramatic. The moth has a skull pattern on its back. Edmund had been seeking one for years." "And you're certain it was a death's head hawk moth?" "I purchased it from a reputable dealer in London. It came with documentation and expert verification." "Mrs. Sterling, where were you between midnight and 2 a.m.? "In my guest room at the manor, sleeping. I stayed overnight at Edmund's invitation. We often did, the 5 of us, made a social evening of it." This was new information. "All 5 of you stayed here last night?" "Yes. Edmund always invited us to stay after the exhibition. Dinner, wine, conversation about our collections. We retired around 11 p.m. I heard nothing unusual during the night." Mr. Benjamin Cross was everything the others weren't. Rough, practical, with scarred hands and sunburned face of someone who'd spent years in jungles and deserts acquiring specimens for wealthy collectors. "I'm a hunter," he said bluntly. "People like Lord Ashcroft pay me to find rare creatures. I find them. Simple business." "Without concern for conservation?" I asked. "Conservation is for people with money and guilt. I have neither. I grew up in poverty, Mr. Aldridge. Learned early that the world doesn't care about your ethics when you're starving. Lord Ashcroft paid well. I delivered what he wanted." "What did you bring him yesterday?" "A chrysalis from New Guinea, bird-wing butterfly, largest species in the world. Edmund had been asking for one for 3 years. I finally tracked down a specimen." "You are certain it was a bird-wing?" "I've handled thousands of chrysalises. I know what I'm looking at." "Mr. Cross, did you know Lord Ashcroft was planning to stop using your services?" His expression went cold. "Where did you hear that?" "I'm asking if it's true." "Edmund mentioned he was considering changing suppliers, said I'd become too expensive, that younger hunters were cheaper." "How did you feel about losing your primary client?" "How do you think? Edmund represented 60% of my income. Losing him meant financial ruin." "Enough motive for murder?" Cross met my eyes directly. "Enough motive, sure, but I'm not stupid enough to kill the golden goose in a locked room surrounded by witnesses. If I wanted Edmund dead, I'd have arranged an accident in the jungle years ago." Miss Sarah Drummond was the youngest of the group, 30 at most, with paint-stained fingers and the dreamy expression of an artist perpetually half lost in her own vision. "I paint butterflies, botanical illustrations for scientific journals. Lord Ashcroft commissioned several pieces from me." "And yesterday's gift?" "A monarch chrysalis, common but beautiful. I raised it myself from a caterpillar I found in my garden. I wanted to give him something with personal meaning, rather than simply rare." "How did he react?" Pain crossed her face. "He was disappointed. Said he'd expected something more exotic from me, that common species held no interest for him." "That must have hurt." "It did. I'd spent 3 months raising that caterpillar, watched it transform. It felt sacred. and Edmund dismissed it as worthless because it wasn't rare enough. Miss Drummond, I understand you're more than just an artist to Lord Ashcroft. She looked away. We had an understanding. He supported my work. In exchange, I provided companionship. You were lovers. I was convenient. Edmund didn't love anything that wasn't behind glass or pinned to a board. Did you resent that? Every day. But I needed his patronage. My art doesn't pay well, and Edmund knew it. He enjoyed the power. 5 collectors, 5 chrysalises, 5 motives, and 1 victim covered in impossible cocoons that didn't match any known species. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While examining Lord Ashcroft's correspondence, Evelyn discovered letters from a 6th person, someone who hadn't attended the exhibition, but whose presence haunted every page. Letters from the Amazon, from a man named Joaquim Tavares. "Listen to this," Evelyn said, reading aloud. "Lord Ashcroft, I write again to beg you to return the azul divino to its native habitat. You do not understand what you have taken. This butterfly is sacred to my people. It is not merely an insect, it is the spirit of our ancestors. By capturing the last pair, you have committed spiritual murder. Please, I implore you, release them before it is too late. What you call collection, we call desecration." The letters continued for months, escalating from pleading to warning to something darker. The final letter, dated 1 week before Ashcroft's death. "You have been given chances to make this right. You have refused all of them. Know this, the spirits of the Azul Divino do not forget, they do not forgive, and they do not remain caged forever. What you have imprisoned will find its freedom, and you will understand too late that some things were never meant to be possessed." "Threats?" I said. "Or prophecy," Evelyn replied. We showed the letters to Dr. Bellamy, who had been conducting further analysis on the mysterious chrysalises found on Ashcroft's body. His face went pale as he read. "My God," he whispered, "I need to show you something." In his makeshift laboratory, he'd carefully preserved one of the chrysalises. Under magnification, its structure was unlike anything in any naturalist's catalog. "This isn't natural," Dr. Bellamy said. "The silk composition is wrong. The internal structure is wrong. This was constructed, Mr. Aldridge, manufactured." "By whom?" "Someone with intimate knowledge of chrysalis anatomy, someone who could create a perfect imitation that would fool expert collectors." "But why create artificial chrysalises?" Evelyn asked. I studied the structure more carefully. The translucent shell, the delicate seams where it had split open. "Not to fool collectors," I said slowly, "to deliver poison." Dr. Bellamy nodded grimly. "That's my conclusion. This chrysalis was a mechanism. The toxin was sealed inside during construction. When conditions were right, heat, humidity, time, it was designed to rupture and release its contents." So one of the 5 collectors gave Ashcroft a weaponized chrysalis disguised as a gift specimen. It sat dormant in the conservatory last night, then released poison that killed him. "But which one?" Evelyn asked. "All 5 brought chrysalises. We need to examine each specimen they claim to have brought." We found the gift specimens exactly where Lord Ashcroft had placed them, in the breeding chamber of the conservatory, each carefully labeled with donor name and species identification. Dr. Helena Ashworth's Malaysian moon moth chrysalis. Brown silk, properly formed, exactly as described, not suspicious. Professor Wickham's glass wing butterfly chrysalis. Delicate, translucent casing, standard structure, no anomalies. Mrs. Sterling's death's head hawk moth chrysalis, large, dark, appropriately dramatic, nothing unusual. Mr. Cross's birdwing chrysalis, massive, forest green casing, perfectly normal for the species. Ms. Drummond's monarch chrysalis, small, jade green, exactly what one would expect from a common species. 5 specimens, all apparently legitimate. None matching the strange chrysalises that had covered Ashcroft's body. "It doesn't make sense," Evelyn said. "If the weapon was a weaponized chrysalis, where did it come from?" I examined the breeding chamber more carefully. Climate controlled, humidity regulated, temperature maintained at precisely 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect conditions for chrysalis development and for weapon activation. "What if," I said slowly, "the poisoned chrysalis was hidden among Ashcroft's existing collection, not given yesterday, but placed here weeks or months ago?" "By whom?" Evelyn asked. "Access to the conservatory is restricted." "To 6 people with keys. But what if someone else gained access? Someone who had reason to want Ashcroft dead? Someone who warned him repeatedly about the consequences of his collecting?" "Joaquim Tavares," she breathed. "An indigenous craftsman from the Amazon, whose sacred species Ashcroft drove to extinction. Who would have the traditional knowledge to create such a thing? Who would have access to rainforest toxins unknown to Western science?" We searched Lord Ashcroft's records more thoroughly, found documentation of his acquisition of the Azul Divino butterflies 6 months prior. The transaction had been handled through an intermediary in Brazil. But there was a note in the margin in Ashcroft's handwriting. "Tavares present during capture, attempted interference, had to pay off local authorities to proceed. Man made threats, consider him dangerous, do not engage." Ashcroft had known, had been warned, had proceeded anyway. And now he was dead, covered in impossible chrysalises that shouldn't exist. But how had Tavares accessed the conservatory? The answer came from the groundskeeper, an elderly man who'd maintained the gardens for 40 years. "There was a stranger," he said when we questioned him, 3 months ago, said he was a researcher from the British Museum, interested in Lord Ashcroft's collection, had letters of introduction, seemed legitimate." "Did Lord Ashcroft meet with him?" "No, sir. His lordship was away in London that week, but the man had proper credentials. I let him tour the conservatory. He spent 6 hours inside, taking notes, photographing specimens. Said he was documenting rare species for scientific purposes." "Describe him." "Dark-skinned, 40 or so, spoke perfect English but with an accent, South American, I thought. He was particularly interested in the breeding chambers, asked many questions about temperature regulation and humidity control." "Did he leave anything behind?" The groundskeeper thought carefully. "He asked permission to leave a gift, said it was custom in his culture, a small carved figure. Lord Ashcroft collected such things from his travels. I saw no harm." "Where is this figure now?" "In the conservatory, on the altar Lord Ashcroft maintained for his most precious specimens." We rushed back to the glass palace, found the altar, a marble pedestal where Ashcroft kept his rarest butterflies under protective domes. And there, easily overlooked among the scientific equipment, was a small wooden carving. A butterfly, exquisitely detailed, wings spread in flight position. Hollow. Inside, we found the mechanism, a tiny compressed chamber that had once held liquid, a timer mechanism made of plant fibers and natural materials that wouldn't trigger suspicion, and a release valve activated by temperature and humidity. The perfect delivery system. 3 months ago, Joachim Tavares had placed this among Ashcroft's collection. It had sat dormant, slowly absorbing the conservatory's controlled environment. And last night, when conditions aligned precisely, it had released its poison into the air. But the poison itself wasn't what killed Ashcroft. The carved butterfly had released pheromones, chemical signals that triggered a response in certain chrysalises in the collection. Not the 5 gifts from yesterday, but chrysalises Ashcroft had collected months earlier from the Amazon, chrysalises of the Azul Divino, the sacred butterfly Tavares had been trying to protect. Those chrysalises, exposed to the pheromone signal, underwent emergency metamorphosis, rapid, violent emergence triggered by chemical warfare, and the butterflies that emerged were venomous. A trait unknown to Western science, a secret the indigenous people had kept for generations. Lord Ashcroft's obsession with possession literally consumed him. The butterflies he'd stolen killed him according to their nature, and Joachim Tavares had simply provided the trigger. We found Joachim Tavares exactly where I expected, in the conservatory, standing before the Azul Divino display. He was 43, weathered by sun and forest, with the quiet dignity of someone who carried the weight of cultural memory in his bones. He didn't run when we approached, didn't deny anything. "You understand what he did," Tavares said, gesturing to the empty chrysalises. "He took the last of them, the final breeding pair. In my culture, the Azul Divino carries the spirits of our ancestors. Each butterfly is a returned soul, visiting from the other side. By caging them, he imprisoned our dead." "So you killed him," I said. "I gave the ancestors the means to free themselves. What happened after that was their choice, not mine." It was a distinction without legal difference, but morally? "Mr. Tavares, you placed a device designed to release poison. That's murder." "I placed a gift, a carved butterfly, as is custom in my people's tradition. If that gift happened to trigger natural processes, can I be blamed for nature?" Evelyn spoke gently. "You knew exactly what would happen. You studied the conservatory, learned its conditions, engineered a weapon specifically designed to activate in this environment." "I returned balance. Lord Ashcroft stole sacred life. The universe corrected itself. Through your intervention, through consequence, he was warned many times. He chose possession over wisdom. Some things carry their own justice." Dr. Bellamy had been examining the Azul Divino specimens. "These butterflies shouldn't be venomous. There's no record of toxicity in any Lepidoptera of this family." "Because," Tavares said, "my people have kept this secret for 300 years. When colonizers came, seeking to exploit everything, we learned to protect what was sacred. We taught the butterflies to protect themselves." "You can't teach butterflies," Dr. Bellamy began. "You can," Tavares interrupted. "Over generations, select for the trait, breed it stronger, hide it from outsiders. We made them beautiful to attract wonder and poisonous to punish theft, the perfect defense." He looked me directly. "I did not murder Lord Ashcroft. I simply made sure the last Azul Divino could defend themselves, as was always their nature, as was always their right." Constable Reeves was ready to arrest him immediately, but I hesitated, because Tavares had revealed something that changed the investigation entirely. The 5 collectors hadn't brought weaponized chrysalises, but one of them had known about Tavares's device. One of them had deliberately triggered it early. "Mr. Tavares," I said, "your mechanism was designed to activate gradually over months, correct? To seem like natural emergence." "Yes, the butterflies would have emerged slowly, naturally. Lord Ashcroft would have assumed it was normal metamorphosis. He would have handled them as he handled all his specimens, and the venom would have taken him slowly, like a disease. But that's not what happened. He died in a single night, covered in chrysalises that all emerged simultaneously. Something accelerated your mechanism." Understanding dawned in Tavares's eyes. Someone knew. Someone triggered the release early, making your sacred justice into their convenient murder. Because that was the truth we'd missed. Tavares had created a long-term consequence, poetic justice, months in the making. Someone else had turned it into immediate murder. And that someone was one of the 5 collectors who'd stayed overnight in the manor. We reconstructed the timeline with new understanding. 7 p.m. Lord Ashcroft locks himself in the conservatory for his evening communion. 11 p.m. The 5 guests retire to their rooms in the manor house. Midnight to 2 a.m. Lord Ashcroft dies. 6 a.m. Body discovered. Somewhere between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., someone left their room, accessed the conservatory, and triggered Tavares's mechanism to release immediately rather than gradually. But who and how? The answer came from Miss Sarah Drummond, who'd been quieter than the others during our investigation. "I need to confess something," she said, meeting us in the manor library. "I couldn't sleep last night. I went to the conservatory around midnight." Evelyn's hand moved to her notebook. "Why?" "Because Edmund had been cruel about my gift, the monarch chrysalis. He called it common, worthless, and I wanted to, see it one more time before he discarded it or gave it away." "You had a key," I said. "Yes. Edmund gave all 5 of us keys for emergency access or if we wanted to visit the collection during our stay." "What did you see?" Her hands trembled. "Edmund was alive, standing before the Azul Divino display. He was talking to them, to the butterflies, apologizing." "Apologizing?" "He said, 'I understand now. I've been wrong. I'll return you to your home, I promise.' He was crying, Mr. Aldridge. I'd never seen Edmund cry." "What did you do?" "Nothing. I left quietly. I didn't want him to know I'd heard. It felt private, sacred almost." "Did you see anyone else?" She hesitated. Then, "Professor Wickham. He was also there, in the shadows, near the breeding chamber. I don't think he saw me, but he was doing something to the carved butterfly figure, the indigenous gift." Professor Wickham, the gentle naturalist who'd collaborated with Ashcroft for 30 years, who'd provided academic resources and university access, who'd helped Ashcroft drive species to extinction through scientific exchange. We found him in his guest room, packing to leave. He didn't deny it when we confronted him. "I knew Joaquim Tavares," he said simply. "He contacted me 3 months ago, explained what Edmund had done, showed me documentation of the Azul Divino's true nature, asked for my help." "And you helped him place the device?" "No, I helped him get access to the conservatory under false credentials, the British Museum researcher's story. I provided those letters of introduction, but I didn't know what he planned to do." "When did you discover the carved butterfly?" "Last month. I came to visit Edmund, saw it on the altar, recognized indigenous craftsmanship. I'm an entomologist, Mr. Aldridge. I understand insect communication. When I examined the carving more closely, I realized what it was, a pheromone release mechanism. And you said nothing. Because Edmund deserved it. 30 years I collaborated with him, telling myself it was for science, but it was for funding, for prestige, for access to his collection. I was complicit in ecological genocide, and I hated myself for it. So last night, you triggered the mechanism early. Edmund had changed his mind. Sarah was right. I heard him promise to return the Azul Givino to the Amazon, to stop collecting, to make amends, and I couldn't let that happen. Evelyn looked horrified. Why not, if he was going to stop? Because, Wickham's composure finally cracked, if Edmund became the hero, the reformed collector who saw the light, then I remained the villain, the academic who enabled him. I couldn't let him have redemption while I carried the guilt alone. The truth was uglier than murder for money or revenge. This was murder for moral symmetry, murder to ensure that if Wickham couldn't be forgiven, Ashcroft couldn't be either. I saw the carved butterfly, understood what Tavares intended, and I thought, this is justice, let it happen. But when I heard Edmund apologizing, promising to change, I panicked. I went to the conservatory after midnight, found the mechanism, and activated it immediately. You killed him to prevent his redemption, I said. I killed him because redemption should have a price. He was going to return the butterflies and be celebrated for his conscience, while dozens of extinct species would remain extinct because of what we did together. His good intentions at the end didn't resurrect the dead. So you made sure there would be no redemption for anyone. Wickham nodded. If I must live with this guilt forever, so should he, even if that meant ensuring he didn't live at all. The legal aftermath was complex. Professor James Wickham was arrested for murder. His confession was clear, his guilt unambiguous. He'd deliberately activated a poison delivery system, knowing it would kill Lord Ashcroft immediately rather than slowly. Joachim Tavares presented a different problem. He'd created the mechanism, but his intention had been long-term consequences, not immediate murder. His carved butterfly was meant to trigger natural defensive behaviors over months, not release concentrated poison in a single night. It's a question of intent and acceleration, I explained to Constable Reeves. Tavares created a trap, but Wickham turned it into an execution. The Crown prosecutor struggled with the distinction. Ultimately, Tavares was charged as accessory to murder. His device had been used for killing, regardless of his original timeline. But the trial became something larger than two men in a courtroom. It became a referendum on collection, possession, and the price of empire. Tavares's defense attorney presented evidence of Lord Ashcroft's systematic destruction of endangered species, documented the bribes, the illegal captures, the extinction events caused by his obsessive collecting. The prosecution argued that murder was murder, regardless of the victim's crimes. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Wickham was found guilty of first-degree murder, sentenced to hang. Tavares was found guilty of manslaughter, sentenced to 20 years imprisonment. But there was a coda to the story that the courts never heard. 2 weeks after sentencing, I received a package at my office. Inside, a letter from Joachim Tavares and a small carved butterfly identical to the one he'd placed in Ashcroft's conservatory. The letter read, "Mr. Aldridge, I am at peace with my sentence. Justice, as your people understand it, has been served. But there is another justice, the kind that takes lifetimes to unfold. The carved butterfly I've sent you contains no poison, no mechanism. It is simply a reminder that some things are not meant to be possessed, that beauty belongs to the wind, not to glass cases, that spirits must fly freely or not at all. Keep it. Let it remind you that every cage, no matter how beautiful, is still a cage, and every butterfly, no matter how common, is still sacred. J.T. Evelyn examined the carving. It's exquisite, sad too, all that knowledge, that artistry, serving only to create a weapon. Or to defend the sacred, I replied, depending on your perspective. Do you think Tavares was right, that Ashcroft deserved to die? I think, I said carefully, that Lord Ashcroft deserved consequences. Whether those consequences should have been death, that's above my authority to judge. But you have an opinion? I have an observation. Lord Ashcroft spent his life capturing and possessing. In the end, he was captured and possessed by the very things he sought to control. There's a symmetry to that. And Wickham? Wickham is a tragedy. A good man corrupted by complicity, who chose murder over allowing someone else to have the redemption he thought himself didn't deserve. That's not justice. That's just spite. We stood in our office as evening fog rolled in from the harbor. The carved butterfly sat on my desk, wings spread in eternal flight that would never happen. "What will you do with it?" Evelyn asked. "Keep it, as Tavares suggested, a reminder that possession is an illusion. We don't own beauty. We're merely its witnesses for a brief time." That's unusually philosophical for you. This case earned philosophy. When murder becomes theology, when collection becomes extinction, when justice requires asking whose definition we're using, philosophy is all that's left. Evelyn closed her notebook. Case file 018, resolved. But in the fog of Mysteryport, another lantern always waits to be lit. Professor Wickham was hanged 3 months after conviction. He went quietly, carrying his guilt with the same meticulous care he'd once applied to his scientific work. Joaquim Tavares served 7 years before being released on humanitarian grounds. His health had deteriorated in prison, but his spirit remained unbroken. He returned to the Amazon, where he worked to restore habitats his people had protected for generations. Lord Ashcroft's conservatory was dismantled. His collection was dispersed to museums and universities, with strict requirements for ethical management. The Azul Divino butterflies, the last breeding pair, were returned to their native valley under Tavares's guardianship. The 5 collectors who'd attended that final exhibition took different paths. Dr. Helena Ashworth dedicated herself to conservation biology, using her knowledge to protect rather than collect. Mrs. Catherine Sterling continued collecting, but shifted to already deceased specimens, refusing to contribute further to species decline. Mr. Benjamin Cross left the specimen trade and became a jungle guide, using his knowledge to help researchers rather than hunters. Miss Sarah Drummond's art evolved. She painted only living butterflies now, refusing to work from preserved specimens. Her paintings sold for remarkable prices. She donated most proceeds to indigenous land conservation. As for me, I kept the carved butterfly Tavares had sent. It sits on my desk still, a reminder that every case carries lessons beyond the simple question of who killed whom. Sometimes I imagine I can see the ghost of Lord Edmund Ashcroft in his dismantled conservatory, walking among empty display cases that once held his obsession. Does he understand now? Does he see that what he called love was actually imprisonment? That what he called preservation was actually death? Or does he still reach for specimens that are no longer there, trying to possess beauty that has finally, eternally flown free? In the fog of Mysteryport, some questions remain unanswered. Some mysteries exist not to be solved, but to remind us that there are truths larger than facts. There are justices that courtrooms cannot reach, and there are crimes that bloom over lifetimes, taking root in choices we make when we decide what we have the right to possess. The azul divino butterflies still fly in their valley, blue wings catching sunlight, spirits of ancestors visiting briefly before returning to wherever spirits go, free, sacred, and finally, mercifully, uncollected. That, perhaps, is the only justice that truly matters. This has been Case 12 of the Mystery Port Chronicles, the Chrysalis Collector, a story of possession and price, of beauty and its cost, of the fine line between preservation and destruction. Some things are not meant to be kept. Some creatures are not meant to be caged, and some collectors learn too late that the butterfly they chase will always, always slip through their fingers in the end. Not because they aren't quick enough to catch it, but because the very act of catching kills what made it worth pursuing in the first place. Remember that as you pursue your own obsessions. Ask yourself not only if you can possess what you desire, but whether possession destroys the very thing you sought. The chrysalis opens, the butterfly emerges, and if you've built a cage instead of a garden, you'll have nothing but empty beauty behind glass. And perhaps, if you're very unlucky, that empty beauty will be all that remains when your own chrysalis finally opens and whatever you've become spreads its wings for the first and final time. This has been Nathaniel Aldridge. The truth has been told. The case is closed. But the questions fly on, like butterflies escaping a collector's net, beautiful and free and forever beyond our reach. Good night from the fog and lamplight of Mystery Port. May you possess nothing you cannot afford to lose, and may what you lose teach you what truly mattered all along.